Hey everyone, Coach Patrick here, back with another Endurance Nation Coach podcast, video cast opportunity to check in, answer some questions, make sure everyone is up to speed with all things endurance. As you probably know, inside Endurance Nation, we work with athletes all over the spectrum, from triathlon to ultra running to off-road, gravel, mountain bike, etc. And with such a wide variety of athletes, there's a lot of different conversations that happen inside Endurance Nation. There's a common theme, around endurance, around, basic strategies, nutrition, managing daily schedules, staying healthy, all the things that endurance athletes are generally wrestling with on a regular basis. But every once in a while, a good question comes out. And I like to hold an episode where I'll just kind of go through those and answer those for you directly. We have a link where you can actually ask me your own question if you want as well. I'll make sure that's included in the show notes and the comments below so you can actually submit that. Be happy to answer your questions as well. A large part of what I try to do here inside the team, inside the community, is to provide reasonable answers that give you a little bit of guidance and room for thought and growth. We're building self-coach athletes here inside Endurance Nation. We're not taking it away from you by doing everything for you. We're not turning things into AI optimized, nuts and bolts equations. We're not responding to alerts the minute you hit the lap button on your watch. It's much more bigger picture, thinking a little bit more about being intentional. We're raising endurance adults, if you will. I want you to be able to make good decisions on race day. I want to be able to make good decisions about your week, even though I or a coach may not be right there to help you do just that. Okay. All right. Awesome. So with that said, let me dive over to the three questions that I have for today, because I want to get into. So first, race selection question. This one came in from Liz here in Rhode Island, neighbor of mine. Getting ready for next year, 2025, and thinking about races. And I have to be honest with you folks, now was the time to start thinking about those races. Hard to believe. It's July, right? You're in the middle, like literally the middle of this year, but the best athletes are already thinking about next year. Not in terms of like, I need to start training or I have to, get out there and sort of scope out the course or do recon, but more so I need to put those building blocks in place so I can be intentional about my buildup and my progression over time so I can increase my odds of success. The best endurance athletes, especially the ones that we work with here, coincidence? I think not, do a fair amount of work on positioning, right? So many athletes focus on like how strong they can be, how fast they can be, how alert they can be, the reaction time, etc. All focused on making the best possible decision in the moment. That's really putting everything to the line. That's like getting really good at swerving at the last second so you don't hit that like random shopping cart in the shopping plaza you didn't see rolling at you, right? That's like the dream scenario. That's what we envision happening. But in reality, we want to make sure that situation never happens, that you're never just randomly driving through a supermarket parking lot, not looking where you're going, especially on a windy day, right? Or where there's like angry people who are just pushing cars at your car. And so the way that we improve those outcomes is through positioning. We make better early decisions to position you strategically for success. And choosing a race now in July for next year, 2025, is actually optimal positioning, because now we can start doing things like planning our travel. We can start looking at, how do I want to manage my season? Do I need time off? Do I need to allocate time for a different area? Do I need new equipment? All of those decisions we can make now. They are less urgent. They are lower costs. And they also allow us to, again, stack the concept of positioning in a way that advantages us, right? If you need a new bike for that race coming up next year, but you don't need it right now, then you can say, you know what? I'm going to try and buy that new bike. I'm trying to buy last year's model. I think if I hurry up, I can still get last year's model now, and it's a good bike versus having to pay for this year's model next year, which is not going to be as good of a price, just as an example. Okay. So the key part here about race selection was, hey, coach, help me find the best race for me next year. I want to go back to Kona, just breaking into a new age group. Which way can I go? So the typical conversation that happens in this space, because I've got an atypical answer, surprise. The typical conversation that happens inside the space is, well, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What are your goals for the race? And then we'll figure out how we can like optimize that balance or improve, like remove problems, and then, help you achieve that goal, whatever your goal may be. In reality, the most important questions to ask are, hey, what is your training going to look like between now and this time next year? Any changes off of your baseline training? You have more time or less time? Is life getting easier to manage or less easy to manage? Like, what does that look like for us, right? Number two, we start thinking about, How are things working for you from the position of just overall like life stress and where you're at, right? Like, are you in a place right now where you think going ahead to next year, you're actually going to be in a good position to handle the training stress that's accompanying your race? Or are you going to be in a worse position to handle that training stress, right? And then number three, what type of training do you have available to you here, like where you are, versus the type of training required to be successful for the event? And that's an important question because a lot of people don't actually think about that. They actually dial into the position where they say, you know what, I want to pick this race because it's really hard, and I want the race to be hard so I can be successful because it'll be a lot harder for everyone else. Well, the reality is that that's not actually the best strategy going forward, simply because you've got to get outside of your normal space. Your normal training isn't sufficient. So when answering Liz's question, I asked her specifically, hey, where are you going to be for the next year, right? Are you mostly at home? Are you traveling? Where are you going to spend your time? What does it look like? What's life looking like for you, et cetera? And based off of that and the criteria for success, which for her is qualifying for Kona, we picked Ironman Ottawa as the race. It's very similar to the conditions here in Rhode Island in terms of rolling hills and wind and heat and humidity. So training here at home actually will be a strength, not a problem, and will be an opportunity to improve without actually having to make significant sacrifices or spend the money and logistical time, all the things associated with choosing more dynamic or extreme races and then having to adjust your training to accompany those choices. So I'm really pleased with this option for her. And I think that going forward, as you think about your races, I encourage you as well to take a good long look at where you are, what resources, amenities, realities you face in your local situation, and then make that race decision based off of that, not just your personal strengths and weaknesses, but your personal reality, right? If you can only train a couple times a week and you want to do this really super hard race that's super far away, you've got to kind of walk into that situation wide eyes open, right? Just knowing like, hey, this is going to be super hard when I get there, so we can help keep you in the right place. All right, awesome. All right, so the next question that I have here is racing in the heat. We had this from Scott. Scott just raced 70.3 in Muncie over the weekend and had questions related to how do I maintain speed on a day that I know is going to be super hot. So this is actually a really great question. And like sort of the level one answer when we think about racing in the heat is doing whatever you can to keep your core body temperature down. And on the bike, that means putting water over yourself to stay cool and staying hydrated. On the run, it means really being smart in the first few miles off the bike. Coming off the bike, your heart rate's at a certain level, and as a result, it's accumulating a certain rate of heat over time. Usually, mitigated or dissipated a little bit by the winds blowing on your body, especially if you're able to keep wet, right? So wet kit moving at 20 miles an hour is actually pretty cooling. Now, the challenge becomes when you get off the bike, that same heart rate now running doesn't bring with it all of those benefits of the wind blowing on you. And instead, for that same heart rate, you're getting an increased rate of heat accumulation. What that means is your body starts to move into the red very rapidly, and all the alarm bells start going off for you as well. So that first 3 miles of the run and a half, or even first 6 miles of the run, or at least 5 in the run for an Ironman, is mission critical to make sure that you're not accumulating too much heat by being very deliberate with your pacing and letting your body adapt to the transition in modality from the bike to the run. Okay, so the piece that I talked to Scott about specifically was how do we manage the heat on the run portion of the course relative to the rest of the day. And the strategies we came up with were twofold. Number one, if you know it's going to be hot for the entire day, not just up cloudy in the morning and sunny later, it's going to be sunny and cloudy and hot, getting hot all day. The heat probably is going to start somewhere around 10:30, or maybe 11, depending, right, where you are on the globe. As a result, all work done before, say, 10 o'clock is actually free work relative to the heat. So whereas the traditional approach to pacing might have had you go easy and kind of get into things and build things all day long, if your bike starts at 8:30 and ends at 11:30, and you plan on riding your hardest, in the last hour from 10:30 to 11:30, you're going to be riding your hardest in the hottest part of the bike, which is a great way to accumulate a ton of heat that you don't need. So instead, we spoke about re-engineering the bike layout to get warmed up pretty quickly on the bike and then get after it, because he's pretty much free from 8:30 until about 10 to ride hard. And then we've got to dial things back be a little more strategic, take the effort down. So from a power meter perspective, if you're riding at 85% of your functional threshold in the first hour and a half, you probably dial that down to like 78 to 80% for the second hour and a half. So really dropping it down 5%, big numbers for you, right? If we're talking 200 FTP, we're talking like 10 to like 15 watts lower, and being really smart on those hills. So we're not accumulating heat where it doesn't advantage us. So we can enter the run again in a better position. There's that theme again with the positioning. Okay. And then when we get out on the run, we're staying cool as well. We're being really smart in those first 3 miles. But then we incorporate these walking breaks. And this is also very important. Brisk walking through aid stations is a way to get everything you need in terms of like water and fluids and nutrition, and also vary the heart rate just enough so that your body can actually see the heart rate come down. And if you're doing it right in those first couple miles, say miles 1 through 6, 1 through 7, maybe even 1 through 8, when you hit that walking section at the aid station or just after the aid station, you're going to notice that heart rate come down. Your body's saying like, oh, yep, time to recover. I'm going to bring it down. Over time, that heart rate will stop coming down because you're going to start pushing more to the finish. The accumulated heat just gets you at some point in time. You simply can't escape it. And it's a push to the finish line. And you're basically racing your physical deadline versus the race finish line and trying to make sure that the race finish line comes at least a few feet first before your own personal physical deadline. In that scenario, it's really important to make sure that you're monitoring your heart rate during the bike and the run and hotter races. So while power is a guide, heart rate is the law. And we want you to make sure that you're paying really close attention to that. So if that heart rate, for example, on the run is not dropping down when you're walking, then you have to do some serious math on can you sustain the effort that you're on right now through to the end of the course, through to the end of the race. If we're talking mile 3 and the heart rate's not coming down, it's time for some serious damage control. Maybe walk for 2-3 minutes just to kind of get that heart rate down meaningfully, deep breaths, cool water, etc., so you can reset. Because sustained high heart rate is simply going to mean too many heartbeats spent relative to the time you want to be. And that heart rate's spent rule is actually like a pretty firm rule I've had for over a decade now. If you're riding and running at home, say at 140 beats per minute, and we've got 60 minutes at 140 beats, your body knows exactly what that is, 8,400 beats. Great. If you're doing that same effort, but instead you're doing it at 150 beats instead of not, that's like 600 more beats. That's a significant percentage of your overall beats has just been wasted because you're at a higher heart rate. And that could be because you're dehydrated. It could be because there's like external conditions, like maybe it's hotter, it's windier, there's a problem with your equipment or your bike, you're stressed out, who knows what it is, bad nutrition, your gut's going south and it's agitating you. Whatever those things may be, keeping that higher heart rate actually burns through your total amount of heartbeats available to you in a day by bringing that finish line closer. So we don't want to have any part to do with that. So to be very smart. So in this case, to recap, the answers were go hard early before things start to heat up on the course on the bike. And then in the second focus on the run, really deliberate in the first 3 miles of the run, and then using power walks to make sure that our heart rate's going down and we're staying cool at each aid station on an ongoing basis. All right. Awesome. All right. Time for question number 3. Last question of the day here in our question and answer episode. Ooh, the taper nutrition question. Those of you who are paying attention know I've got my Lake Placid rock here behind me. Where is it? There it is. Hey, Lake Placid, what's up? Right, looking out over Mirror Lake for the Lake Placid swim. That is coming up this weekend for those of you who are in the know and pay attention to the triathlon game. So very exciting. And so we got some people who are tapering for this race, and they've got taper questions relative to how to ensure they're making sure that they're making good decisions relative to their nutrition in this final week. So macro-wise, because we always work macro to micro, your training load has come down. And in the past, when you were training super hard, you were eating a lot of calories to make sure that you were still functionally able to perform as a human being, but also perform in your workouts. Well, as we start to take away the work efforts, you've got to be really smart to bring down that nutritional effort as well. So I recommend that you're very smart and deliberate about your nutrition. Ideally, you've been eating a simple baseline meal schedule the whole time and simply use the workouts as the mechanism to determine, are you eating more or less in the context of the workout? Right. So if you're going to do a 3-hour ride on one day, but you do no hour ride on the next day, the additional calories come from the 3-hour ride and the 3-hour ride nutrition, not by having like yes or no to a pizza or yes or no to chocolate chip cookies later in that day. So we put the focus on our nutrition into the workout portion of our lifestyle as an athlete, which is really, really important. But regardless, as you head into this final week for the race, you have to be really smart. And so I do recommend eating clean, eating smaller portion sizes, staying hydrated, and eating slowly. So ideally, you've got a little more time in your life now that you've got a little less training, so you can kind of slow things down. be more deliberate, make good choices. If you're a rule follower, you can set a certain rules like yourself, like, hey, you know what, no food after 8 p.m. It's only junk food, etc. Things like that make sense. But whatever you do, make sure you're eating clean, and that you're not restricting yourself from calories overall. That's not a great strategy here. Just eat cleaner. Like if you're worried about calories but you're hungry, then put some lean meat on a nice big salad and have that. You can do that all the way up until, I don't know, like Thursday, Friday before a Sunday race. That's totally fine. You can still eat super clean and make those personalized nutrition choices. Now, as we head into the final 2 days to the race, that's where things get switched up a little bit. That's when we want to start thinking about emphasizing carbohydrates and making sure that you are properly fueled and hydrated heading into the day. Working backwards from the race, the most important meal before your Sunday race is your Saturday morning breakfast. I do recommend going out, pancakes, French toast, carbohydrates, all the things that you want, load up on it. You want to have a big breakfast that day, ideally about 24 hours before your race. So, 7 a.m., 8 a.m., find that breakfast place, crush that food. You should feel pretty damn full coming out of that. I usually order 2 things, like a thing of pancakes and a thing of French toast as an example. And then throughout the rest of the day, you're snacking on pretzels, you're eating Fig Newtons, you're avoiding fruits in general. Maybe you have a sandwich, like sandwich with some turkey, maybe a tiny bit of cheese and mustard. Really avoiding vegetables, fruits during this time, all the fiber, but keeping yourself full. They have a bottle of your sports drink in the afternoon, so you're getting some electrolytes, maybe even like a bar like that you'll have from the race later on in the afternoon. You're just acclimatizing your body to like the nutrition that's going to be coming the next day, but also getting those calories. And then you have a small dinner, 6 to 7 p.m., ideally done at home. Maybe you got takeout from lunch or takeout from a day before. You can just reheat it or just make something simple at home like pasta with a little bit of chicken, whatever that may be. But keep it sort of light and easy, and then into bed early, right? Staying hydrated, etc. And then you got your pre-race breakfast. The day before the big breakfast, we still want to be smart. And the problems that people can, the bad decisions that people make on that Friday before the race is they're still trying to get stuff done and they're a little stressed out, and they may opt to do other things that don't work out for them. So they try and go out to dinner, which is a Friday night, wherever you are, which is going to be jam-packed because it's a race venue and everybody's there, and they also want to go out to dinner on Friday night. So you need to plan accordingly with a reservation and make sure that you're good. And ideally you're eating early enough, still like in that 6-7 time frame, just conditioning yourself for what's coming later. That means you need to have a good breakfast and a decent lunch as well, even though you'll be doing stuff on the bike, on the run, on the swim in Lake Placid. And so plan accordingly, like have the food available or plan to stop on those sessions to eat. Calories are your friend. We don't want to go nuts, but we want to make sure we're eating proper meals. If you're just walking around an expo and sampling bars and drinking random fluids from big, gigantic containers from new products you haven't ever had before, that's not a nutritional strategy. That's a plan for disaster. Like it's a good disaster mitigation exercise. Like I need something cold in my body and here's something cold. But in general, you can do better than that just by being really smart, right? So have a good dinner on that Friday night and make sure it's complemented by a good breakfast and lunch as well. Even if it's small, even if it means stopping on your bike at a cafe and eating, all of that works too, but be really smart. There's really no workouts that you can do on Saturday, which should be a day off before Sunday. And on Friday, which is more just sort of like shake out, make sure things work and get it all dialed in. That should be taking up all of your time. Simultaneously, this may be your last time really on Friday to do stuff with your family. So if you do have an activity planned, because Saturday you're kind of laying around and Sunday is your big day with the race, and Monday you're useless. If you do have something planned for the family on Friday, sunscreen, hydration, take care of yourself, be smart, off your feet if at all possible. Like don't plan a gigantic, hike in the sun in the middle of the day on Friday. Not a good idea. So like be strategic about planning that out. Make sure you have plenty of snacks and fluids available to you. So even if you do get a little outside of your comfort zone or you do opt to do a little bit more, hey, after all, you are an endurance athlete. You've at least got the fluid and the calories to offset that cost to your body. So you're good. Even if the day doesn't go as planned, plan on winding down in the late afternoon, going through your race plan, doing some light stretching, taking care of yourself, kind of getting back inside your head before you go out to dinner and into the rest of the evening. This is your last 24 hours into the race. You're probably solving some important problems, but if you really step back and look at it, a lot of them may simply be urgent and not important. And so really take the time to slow down. For those of you on the team, you can obviously check in with your teammates and just, message, text, figure out like, hey, who can help me out with this? Anyone can answer that, etc. So we're all connected and we can be good and make sure you're all on the same page. All right. Awesome. Hey, thanks for tuning in to this question and answer episode. I'm super excited to be able to bring this to you. Again, link will be in the show notes for you to ask your own questions. If you want to go ahead and put them in here, I'm happy to answer them. A large part of what we do here inside Endurance Nation is just provide real people answers on the regular to people like you who have questions about your training and racing. You don't have to use the internet or AI or just guessing or whatever the last magazine said or whatever your buddy said in the locker room about workouts just to be your best guidance. You can connect with me and peers inside Endurance Nation who've been training for decades to be excellent at the races that we all know and love. Thanks for tuning in. Have a fantastic week. I'll talk to you soon. Until then, be well, be safe, be active. Have a good one.